Hi and welcome to Dev Pointers. Today we are going to see how configuration works in .NET. So let's start. In .NET, the configuration is performed using one or more configuration providers. So basically there can be multiple configuration sources, and configuration providers provides a way to basically read from these different sources. These sources could be like a settings files such as app.settings.json, environment variables, Azure Key Vault, Azure App Configurations, and so on. So the keywords here are configuration sources, basically where your configuration values are, configuration providers, which are responsible for reading from those configuration sources. The third important thing to remember is iConfiguration interface, which provides a unified view of configuration data from different sources. So, if there is one single configuration source or multiple configuration sources, for example, let's say app settings.json and environment variables, let's say these are the two configuration sources in your project. Ultimately, you are going to have a iConfiguration object created that will have the values from these two different sources. So for example, if there is a configuration value called name in app settings.json and you have another configuration, uh, let's say name age in the environment variables, you will have both these name and age in your iConfiguration object that you will create as part of this. And it exposes certain inbuilt functions that you can leverage. So it's like one interface, that could be leveraged by using different configuration sources. Now, one important thing to note here is that when we have different configuration sources and we add these configuration sources while building this configuration object, the order in which we add these sources matters. So basically, the one that is added later takes precedence over the one that was added before. So in this case, let's say we have a property called name in both app settings and environment variables, and we have added app settings.json first and environment variables later, then the value from the environment variable will take precedence. Um, in some cases, there are some abstract classes that allows us to not explicitly add these configuration sources. In that case, the configuration, precedence order is as here, which is basically the command line arguments, environment variables, app secrets, app settings files for different environments, um, and chain configuration provider. So that's the default priority if you are not adding the configuration providers for different sources explicitly. And we'll show both these cases when you add explicitly and when you don't in our tutorials that is coming next. All right, let's start by creating a .NET Core console project um, from Visual Studio. So go to File menu and create a project. Select Console App. This is what we are going to call our project, Configuration Builder Extension. Here we go. And just to make sure everything is working fine, let's try to run this project. So we are going to build it. And run. So everything is working fine. It displays hello world as expected. All right. The next step is to add Microsoft.Extension.Configuration packages to this project. So for that, what we'll do is we'll go to the project and right click and select Manage NuGet Packages. And from here, we are going to install the required packages. So the first one is Microsoft.Extensions.Configuration.Binder. Click on that, install. The second one is JSON, Microsoft.Extensions.Configuration.JSON. And since I'm going to also give you an example of environment variables as a configuration source, so we are going to also install a package for that, which is Microsoft.Extension.Configuration.Environment variables. Now, once we have these packages installed, you can actually go and see their references has been added to the project file. So right click on the project and go to project properties. And you can actually check the package references from the project file. So right click on the project and look for edit project file, which is this. So in here you can see all these three package references has been added. The first one is the configuration.binder, which is basically used to read the values, configuration values, and bind them to a specific type. It could be a class or it could be a primitive type, for example, string or integer. The second one is configuration.environment variables, which is basically we need this package to use the environment variables configuration provider. The third one is configuration.json to read the values from a JSON file using the JSON configuration provider. Now, in order to read configurations from a file, let's go in and create a configuration file first. So right click on the project, go to add new item, and from here we are going to create a JSON file, which is under the web templates JSON file, and let's call it app settings.json. In here we are going to create a settings section, and inside setting we'll have a name property. Let's call it dev pointers, and another property, let's say topic, and call it .NET configurations. So here we have our input configuration file. Let's go back to our program.cs, and what we'll have to do is we'll have to add the package reference here for the configuration. So Microsoft.Extensions.Configuration. And the next step here is to basically use the configuration builder to read the configuration values from the file and expose them in the form of iConfiguration object, right? As we discussed before, the iConfiguration interface provides a unified view of different input sources, right? So we are going to create an instance of that iConfiguration interface type. So iConfiguration config, is equals to new configuration builder. And now we are going to add different configuration sources. So let's start by adding JSON file. The name of file is appsettings.json. And let's also add a source from environment variables. And then we say build. Now we have our object created, the iConfiguration object. Now the next step is just to simply go and read the configuration values from that object. So let's write it to the console. So in this case, what we'll do is we'll say config dot get section. As I said that we have created, we want to read the entire settings section here. So section name, and then from that section we want to read the name value, right? So we do get dot get value. We give the type of that value, which is string, and then we give the name of that property. So this will basically, it's going to display the name property from that file. Let's also do the topic property. Now before we run this, we want to make sure that the runtime is able to read this file from the correct location. So when you run this .NET Core project, right, it's basically running the executables from the bin folder, right? So we want to make sure that this file is available there. For that, what we have to do is we have to go to this file in the Solution Explorer, right click, open the properties, and select copy to output directory to always. So what this property will do is that every time you build your project, it's going to take that file and put it into the bin folder. Once that is done, I think we are good to give it a run. So let's run this project. And here you can see we have the name as dev pointers and topic as .NET configurations. The other way of reading the values is something like this. For example, if I go to this file and let's say we add another property called session, and if I go back here and let's say if I want to read that property, what I can do here is that instead of reading the section, I can directly read the value, but I have to give a fully qualified name for that particular property. So in this case, it would be settings colon session. Right, and we can say session here. Right, let's run it. And we can see we have a session value here as well. So in this case, we are reading these values directly using the primitive types. When you have like a lot of values in the configuration and you have like a lot of hierarchy, like a nested sort of structure in your settings, I think it's better to use a configuration class and then bind the input values to the object of that configuration class. So let's try to do that here. So we are going to create a new class by right clicking on the project, add a class, and let's call this class as settings dot JSON, sorry, settings.cs, and here we will call this as public class, and we are going to add some properties here that should have the same name as the configuration file. So public string name, get set, public string topic, get and set, and public int session, get and set. All right, we have our class ready. Let's go back to the program.cs. In here, what we'll have to do is we'll have to add the reference for this class so that we can use it here. So we are going to use the namespace reference here in the using. And now we are going to create an object of settings class. So we'll say config dot get section settings dot get, and in here we'll have to give the type of object that we are binding this input file to, and that's it. Now this object holds all the configuration values. So what you can do is you can display these three values in a similar manner, but reading it from the settings object. So here we can call it as we call any other object properties, right? So settings.name, settings.topic, settings.session. Right, let's give it a try. And here you go. You can see these are exact same values twice, displayed twice. So it's all working. The next step is we can also see and add some values in the environment variables. So in the configuration, um, like when we build this configuration, right, the order in which we add these input sources matters, because in this case, when you are adding the app settings.json, let's say there is a configuration value of name property, right? But if that same property name is present in the environment variables, then it is going to override that value because it's added later. So basically, in the order in which you add the sources is the order in which it overrides the values. So let's take an example here. What we'll do is we'll add a name configuration in the environment variable, and in the output, it should basically override the name that we have in our app settings, which is dev pointers. So let's go to the project, right click and go to properties, debug, general, and in here you can add a environment variable, but here you have to give the fully qualified name. So in this case, it would be settings colon name equals to, we are going to give dev arrays, and that's it. Now if you run this, it should display dev arrays instead of dev pointers. And here you go. You can see the name value is now dev arrays. and that is expected because our environment variable configuration source is added after the JSON file. So yeah, that's how we read the configuration sources using the configuration builder extension. All right. There is one another way by which you can um, get the I configuration object, and that is by using hosting extension. So I have created this project in a similar manner as I showed you before. Um, and the project name I have called it as hosting extension. It has app settings, the same file. It has the settings class to get the configuration values. So what we have to do is we have to first go and install the hosting package. So for that, again, you can go to the project, right click, and manage NuGet packages. And here you have to search for Microsoft.Extensions.Hosting package. And once you see that, you can go and install. I have already installed it, so you can do the same. The next step is go to the program.cs file and write the using directives. So the first one is Microsoft.Extensions.Configuration. That's the basic package that we need. And then we have to use Microsoft dot extensions dot dependency injection, and I'll show you why we need that. Microsoft dot extensions dot the one that we just added, hosting. All right. So what this hosting package does is basically it provides an abstract configuration builder. So basically you don't really have to add the configuration sources by yourself. The default builder inside this hosting package does the work for you. So we'll go and define a host first. Host dot create default builder and arguments dot build. So you have initiated a default builder, configuration builder, and the next step is to get the configuration object, right? That's what we always look for when we are reading the configurations. So it's basically host dot services dot get required services service, and in here we can say I configuration, and that's it. So basically this get required service, and when we are passing this I configuration type, this is where the dependency injection is taking place. So this host object exposes all the services that are available in the program, and by using that we are saying that give us an instance of I configuration, and populate it with whatever values its constructor needs, right? So now you see that we are not adding any app settings um, file here into the configuration itself. It has been already populated. So what we just need to do is we need to do configuration dot get value, and you can say string. Let's say we want to read the name, and we know the name of that, the fully qualified name path of that setting is settings colon name, and you can display it basically. So console dot right line name and that's it. So if I go to my configuration file here, it has dev pointers in the name field, right? But we have to also um, make sure that there is no environment variable with the same name. Otherwise, it will display that. So there is a default order in which uh, all these configuration sources are added into this configuration. And if there is environment variable with the same name, then that the value from the environment variable is going to take the precedence. And we discussed that briefly before, right? So now let me just go and run it. All right, it's basically settings. You can see here the name has been displayed as dev pointers. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Today we covered two ways of reading the configuration values by using the configuration builder and the hosting extension. And there are other ways through which we can add different configuration values, and I'll make some videos on that as well. But to understand how configuration basically works in .NET, I think it's a good start. Thank you for watching the video.